Welcome back to Worth a Shot, the show where I recommend some of my favorite games to you. Today, I'll take a look at my favorite game of all time. Welcome to Final Fantasy X. So, before I start talking about the game, I feel like I need to elaborate as to why this is my favorite game. Final Fantasy X was the first game I ever got for my PlayStation 2, and at the same time it was the first JRPG I had ever played. This was the first time a game's story really pulled me in, and before I knew it I had spent way over 200 hours in this game. But enough reminiscing, I just want you to be aware that I might be a little biased towards this game. Just a little. But let's get into it. Final Fantasy X is the 10th main entry in the Final Fantasy series and probably one of the highest rated games in the entire franchise. Originally released in 2001 on the PlayStation 2, the game was re-released as Final Fantasy X and X-2 Remastered on the PlayStation Vita, the PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 4 and most recently on the PC, which is the version I'll talk about. The story revolves around Tidus, the star player of his home city's blitzball team. During a blitzball tournament, the city is attacked by an enormous being called Sin. Sin destroys the city and somehow takes Tidus to the world of Spira. In order to figure out what has happened to him and if there's a way for him to return home, he decides to join a young summoner Yuna on a quest to defeat Sin. As this game heavily relies on its story, I won't go into any further detail as I don't really want to spoil anything for people who haven't played the game yet. I'll just say that the story holds up really well for the most part, except for a few scenes, and if you played the game, you probably know which ones.
What? Come on, show me! You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
In terms of gameplay, Final Fantasy X deviates a little from former titles in the series. The most obvious part probably being the lack of an overworld map. In older games you had a map that was used to travel between major areas, while in this game the areas are interconnected. This makes the game fairly linear, which makes sense in terms of the story as you are journeying through Spira with a certain target location in mind. There is still a lot of exploration going on though, but until late in the game it's mostly go from point A to point B. For some people this might trigger some bad memories of Final Fantasy XIII, which is known for its very linear areas, but I can assure you that it's nowhere near as bad as that. While you are traversing the areas, you will have random encounters which will result in a battle. I've never been a fan of random encounters, but I also realized that this was probably the easiest way to do encounters back when the game was released. This also brings me to the next deviation from older Final Fantasy games, the combat system. While the previous entries in the series mostly used a ATB system or active time battle system, Final Fantasy X uses a CTB or conditional turn-based battle system. While the ATB system featured real-time elements, the CTB system is completely turn-based. That means that the battle is paused during each of the character's turns. Since there's no time limit for your turns, you can plan your moves carefully and try to devise a proper strategy. I know that many people prefer some kind of real-time component, but I prefer this kind of system because I like to plan out my moves in advance without any pressure. Limit break moves reappear in Final Fantasy X as overdrives. These are highly damaging moves which mostly require some specific button inputs in a short time to increase their power. Summons are also in the game, but work a little different from previous games. Whereas summoned creatures previously just performed one action and then left, the Aeons, as they are called here, actually replace your entire battle party. The Aeon will then fight instead of your party until it's either defeated, victorious, or dismissed. You might have already picked up on the trend of Final Fantasy X breaking old traditions of the franchise, so it shouldn't come as a surprise for you that the character progression is also a little different. Instead of leveling up the old-fashioned way where characters gain certain stat increases upon level up, characters in this game gain sphere levels, which can be spent on the sphere grid. On this grid, you can move your characters and unlock nodes in order to gain the stats or abilities on these nodes. This may seem like it's overcomplicating things, but it allows you to customize your characters to a high degree. If you so desire, you could completely reassign the battle roles of all of your characters, by making them follow different paths on the sphere grid. For a first playthrough, that might not make a lot of sense, but many people just mess around with their builds on subsequent playthroughs. While we're at gameplay, Final Fantasy X even offers a few minigames, ranging from chocobo racing over butterfly hunting all the way to the iconic Blitzball. Those aren't just there for fun though, as you will have to complete them in order to gain materials for the best weapons in the game. Whew, I think that's it for gameplay, so let's take a look at graphics and sound. In terms of visuals, the game looks quite good for a 15-year-old game. The HD remastered version received support for high resolutions, HD textures, anisotropy filtering, anti-aliasing, ambient occlusion and a few more. All of those improvements can't really make up for the lack of facial animations and some 2D backgrounds, but this is a remaster, not a remake, so if you keep in mind that this was originally released on the PS2, this game looks amazing. But since it was a PS2 game, it also carried another restriction to the PC. The frame rate is limited to 30. This is a limit set by the game's engine, but this doesn't really affect the gameplay since the game is mostly turn-based, so I can deal with that. Sound-wise, the game is just as good as it was 15 years ago. The soundtrack is still amazing, and if you want, you can even listen to a rearranged version of it. I will say though, that the original version is still better in my opinion. The voice acting, while a little shaky at times, is solid and is fitting for all the characters. I cannot speak for the Japanese voice acting though, since I never played with it. Also, because of Final Fantasy X's huge success, it was the first Final Fantasy game to receive a direct sequel. And while X-2 is nowhere near as good as 10, it is definitely worth playing if you enjoyed the world and atmosphere of the first game. But I believe this video has gone on for way too long now, so I'll just stop right here. This was a relatively quick look at my favorite game of all time. If you want to pick it up for yourself, it is available on the PS Vita, PS3, PS4 and on PC. That's it for me though, so I'll leave you with the words that start this wonderful journey.
Listen to my story. This may be our last chance.